All right, I think I got everything. This is turned off. Oh, this notifications. How do you turn that off? Hang on. Hey Siri, turn on Do Not Disturb.
I don't understand.
Okay, I turned on Do Not Disturb.
One Siri understood and one didn't. How could that be? All right. Okay, recording on. All right. Hello, folks. Jeff Salzman here. Start that over. Hey, folks. Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. Thank you for those who are tuning in live on Integral Live. And again, I'm here Tuesdays and Thursdays as a rule at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. Next week, just Tuesday because of Thanksgiving, and then we'll do another week. And then I go in to get my total knee done, and I'll check in after that and see how it's going. You can get all of my stuff if you're interested in some of the archives and so forth. I've been doing this for several years, many years actually. And you can find that all at dailyevolver.com. All right. So today, I wanted to just sort of regroup here a little bit politically. We've had the midterms. The dust is settled. We can see where we're at moving forward here. We have this Trump era, the first 2 years of it, that's, settled. And we can see how maybe that will, unfold. And so I wanted to bring my integral lens to this moment and see if there's anything that it will reveal to us. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about some of the past shows I had done, and I thought I might check back on them. And I figured there were at least 4 or 5 that I did on Trump. It turns out there's over 12, depending on how you define it. But, he is a really defining character for our time. And I really hate to admit that because I find him so repulsive, actually, even in just the physical body, there's a repulsion. And of course, as a good integral practitioner, I can see that repulsion rather than be it all the time, at least when I remember to. And, I can become interested in that and see what that has to tell me about me as well as him. So anyway, just to do a quick recap on some of the big themes I've talked about with Trump over the last couple of years, actually. First, I would go back to a podcast I did called Trump the Terrible, the Boy Who Would Be King. And this was over 2 years ago, where I made the case that Trump is at the arrested stage of development that we in integral theory would call red. And that is the warrior stage of development. In fact, I have a slide I can share here. And we can see down here at red that it is egocentric, vigilant and aggressive, impulsive and ruthless, and courageous, determined, and powerful. And that here we're mapping out the development of human culture. This came online roughly 15,000 years ago out of the tribal stage of development. And it represents progress, just as it does for a 3-year-old over a 2-year-old. in the sense that the terrible twos and threes, when a child basically wakes up to its own individuality and to see that it is something separate from mother and family and the environment, which is progress, that there is a, basically an eruption, a geyser of expression in even a healthy kid that, becomes more civilized as more layers are laid on top of that. And so in Trump, it's very rare to see. I'm not sure that I've ever seen anybody like him in the sense that he is successful in the world. Most red people, who are arrested in the way that he is, are in prison, or they're at the under a bridge, or they're at the end of a bar. But this is where I nurture this secret fear, suspicion thing that Trump is actually a dark spiral genius, and he actually gets a lot more than he's letting on, but he has this red capacity, this willingness and ability to use it that is, brings him, in essentially a certain kind of superpower, which is appropriate because red is the stage of development where we love superpowers and we like superheroes. And that's one of the ways that red still lives in the culture, as it should, and as it lives in all of us, which is why there's, a strong reaction one way or the other to Trump's redness. People who share that sort of center of gravity, if you will, of development, love it because it's riveting. And we all sort of find it riveting, just the way we would if we see a car wreck or a street fight. It's hard to look away from some of this stuff. But at a certain stage of development, we develop a repulsion to that. I mean, modernity, in a way, traditionalism, this next stage of development. Let's take a quick look. Traditionalism comes online to civilize the crazy, chaotic nature of the red. So you get these, big, God comes online for one thing. Faith, values, rules, roles, discipline, the ability to sit in a chair and listen and that sort of thing comes online. And that continues to be civilized at orange. And then by the time we get to green, which are postmodern values, the progressive values, that red becomes repulsive in a way and frightening. And we don't know quite what to do with it. We've become detached from it in our own sort of spiral stack, if you will. So anyway, as we look at Trump and we see, so what are the characteristics of being arrested at that stage, or at least having a great capacity at that stage and a willingness to use it? We talk so much about Donald Trump being a winner and his love for winning and how he's going to have us all be tired of winning. And the case I made before and stand by is that there's one thing that Trump likes more than winning, and that's just merely fighting. And you can see it. He fights when he wins. He fights when he loses. He's fought his way up and he's fought his way down in several boom and bust cycles in his life. And that's just what he does. And that's the nature of having a center of gravity, or your real heart, your self-sense down in that red territory. And it just gets to one of the, I think, realizations of integral consciousness is just how radical and how all-encompassing these stages of developments, these worldviews, or as Ken Wilber likes to say, these world spaces, these actual, planets that we all live on are so radically different. And we can look at that and we can think about, for most of us here listening to the Daily Evolver, we maybe integral practitioners and working on moving into integral. But what that means is that most of us have a good stability at green. And so we want to feel like we want to feel what that green, what is the quality of that green world space. And there are several, but one of the biggies is that green is sensitive to the suffering of other people, particularly those who have been victimized or left behind in some way. And so you can feel that probably if I ask you about that. And you can feel how important that sensitivity is to you, how fundamental it is to your nature, and how bad you feel about yourself when you violate it, that ethic of sensitivity. All right, so as an integral practice, if you want to get a sense of what red feels like, substitute sensitivity with struggle, with fighting. Sometimes winning, sometimes losing, but always fighting, always being vigilant, always engaging the struggle of life. And I did a podcast a while back on Saudi Arabia. I was talking about the Bedouin heart of Saudi Arabia, the Bedouin nomads, and their famous saying, and I'll just say it, it's self-explanatory. This is the Bedouin creed, and it's I, my brother, and my cousin against the stranger. I and my brother against my cousin. I against my brother. So you can feel into what that world space is. So if you're not struggling or fighting, you feel bad about yourself. You start to feel unsafe, anxious, depressed. You feel like you're letting yourself down, your family down. And that is, that is the world you live in. So that explains a lot about Trump to me. And again, it's rare to see it in somebody who is also functional in the higher stages. That is, he's functional he's actually got traditionalists wrapped around his finger. And some modernists, he clearly can work in the modern world. He built buildings and, whatever he's done, created a personality, a television show. He's functional in that world. And even in green, in the sense that he understands liberal culture. He lived in New York City for years. He was a Democrat. He gave money to all the right causes. Whether he really believed it or has that kind of sensitivity, I doubt. But this is part of the, this is part of the stack, the spiral stack of Donald Trump. So another, I think, insight we have into Trump at this point that's pretty reliable is this sense that he has, it's not just red, or I actually haven't quite figured this out. But the point I wanted to make is that Trump clearly has a narcissistic personality disorder. And my question is that just the nature of red? Because, red, even in a 3-year-old, even as it reprises itself in early teens, there's a certain egocentrism that is, I don't know if it's the same as a narcissistic personality disorder or not, but there is such a thing. And I did a podcast called Donald Trump Has a Very Small Amygdala, where I talked about this. And I talked about an article that really caught my eye. It was in Atlantic Magazine. And it was, I think the title is When Your Child is a Psychopath. And it was about children who have been diagnosed with what they call callous and unempathetic traits. And in many ways, Trump fits the profile of these children. And actually did as a child too, if you read some of the stories of his childhood, where he would throw the birthday cake and he would throw the stones at the neighbor's dog and that kind of stuff. But there's a couple interesting insights into these kids because they're doing real work with them and actually trying to help them become better adults and, with some success. And what they found is that these callous and unempathetic kids do not respond to disapproval or punishment, but they do respond to praise and rewards. And so they have a whole protocol built on that. And I talk about it on there. I won't repeat all of it, but it does give me an insight into Trump where he is just impervious to the kind of disapproval and blowback that would just, kill other people. But what the currency for him is who's praising me and what am I getting and my bling and my, bullshit. And so, what I've realized in the last couple of years and with the rise of Trump is just how powerful all this is. And that, again, we all have these early, more visceral stages of development within us, the level of animal, the level where it's magic is true and alive. And the great myths and the great stories of personalities and bigger than life personalities, and they come and bestride the earth. And, it's like Trump told his staff early on in the administration. He says, I want every day to be the story of me battling my enemies. And that's that reality show quality where you, just keep attention on yourself. That was another quality of these kids, is that they love attention. They want to keep all eyes on them. And that's Donald Trump, just through, chaos, bullshit, lying, whatever. It doesn't matter the quality of the attention as much as the attention itself and the quantity of it. So, there's a whole strata of people for whom this is the most exciting thing they've seen in a long time, probably about 20% of the population. And, they want to make America great again. And they want to go back to the way things were. And it's just simple as that. That's where they felt more comfortable. They don't like all of this multiculturalism. It's confusing. It's, they don't like it. And so for them, it's like, to heck with your facts and charts and books and analysis and all of the stuff that comes on at modernity. For them, that's all fake news. I'm actually beginning to get what these people respond to when Trump talks about fake news. And again, I would go back to one of my podcasts called Pre-Truth, Post-Truth, and Beyond. And that is that for people who are pre-modern, basically, in terms of their centers of gravity, the certainly red and to a large degree also amber traditionalists, at that stage of development, when the whole world was red and amber, there weren't facts. There weren't Wikipedia. You couldn't check things. There wasn't a fact checker at the Washington Post. There wasn't anything like any of that. What there was personality and story and rumor and palace intrigue and all of the stuff that is the currency of that red, that red stage and that sort of autocratic stage of development. And that it is very, very powerful for those people. And of course, repulsive for most of the rest of us. And I think enough of the rest of us that he won't ultimately prevail. But, I was certainly wrong before. So to me, the big question is regarding Trump. Is he just a force of nature? Does he actually get it about himself? Does he have a self-reflective capability where he can see what he's doing, or is he just a force of nature? And I'm not sure the verdict's in on that. But if it's the latter, where he actually does see what he's doing, then he qualifies as my definition of a dark spiral genius. He's working the spiral, he's working the system. And and all of a sudden it makes sense, some of the things he said about himself, which is that, who do I consult with? I consult with myself. I have a very good brain. I am a very stable genius. And in some ways, you sort of got to hand it to him. I mean, who in the world, what political consultant would have advised him to diss John McCain's hero status? I mean, it would be crazy. Or to say in the first debate, be the only one of the 13 who raises his hand and says, no, I'm not going to promise to support the eventual nominee of the party. That's suicide. This is a Republican nomination. But he consulted with himself, his dark spiral genius self. And, it's worked. And there's a couple other things that have given me sort of a sense that he might have a self-reflective capability here, and he knows what he's doing. One was the epigram to Bob Woodward's new book, Fear, not so new now, 6 months old, whatever, book. It's a Fear. It's about the Trump presidency. And he got the title because in his interviews with Trump, he asked Trump what Trump thought the essence of leadership was. And Trump's response was, I hate to say it, but it's fear. And the fear part doesn't surprise me. That's just garden variety red. But the I hate to say it part is sort of intriguing because why? It's true and it's worked for you. But that sort of self-reflective thing about, I get that we're not supposed to like this, there's a worldview in which this isn't true or shouldn't be true, but it's still true enough. That starts to be, have a little more of a consciousness capacity. The other one, and this is a little odd one, is in one of the press conferences where he was, I think, talking about Kavanaugh and Kavanaugh's drinking. And of course, he had to make it about himself, and he did. And he said, I myself have never had a beer. For whatever reason, he said, I don't drink at all, never have. And can you imagine what a mess I'd be if I did? And it was a good joke, and it was a self-deprecating joke, which Trump is not known for, and of which Red is not at all known for, self-deprecating. That it showed a little more to the party than just that. So the question is, how's this all ultimately going to work? Of course, we don't know, but we can, again, see some, we can draw some conclusions after these first couple years. And one is that in a bipartisan, polarized society where, up to now at least, the choice has been between one of two parties, that there is just a natural attraction or magnetic pull towards the kind of polarization that we are feeling. And that's really a big leverage point for Trump. And one of the things that has caught my eye recently that I think really ought to concern progressives, because what really is going to determine a lot of this is what the left or the Democrats really, how they play their hand. Now that they have the House of Representatives, and we're moving into 2020 with a pretty much historically unpopular president, even though he has a lot of intense popularity among the people who really love him. And this was an article also in The Atlantic called "Americans Strongly Dislike PC Culture." And it's written by Yashka Monk, who is a professor at Harvard, and it's about a study that 3 political scientists did. I'll link to it on the site. And what they showed, this was a good study, that 80% of the general population agree with the statement, this is in America, 80% agree with the statement, political correctness is a problem in our country. And what was so interesting about this is, well, first of all, 80% agreeing with anything you don't run into in the kind of polarized society that we're talking about, especially when you're talking about a political issue. But there we are. And it cut across all demographics. Of course, the conservatives agreed with it. The most conservative people agreed with it, 98%. But even across all the typical permutations, young people, between the ages of 24 to 29, 74% agreed with the statement, political correctness is a problem. People under 24, 79% agreed with that. White people, 79%. Asians, 82% agreed. Hispanics, 87% of Hispanics agreed with the statement that political correctness is a problem in our country. So that's fascinating to me. But how about Blacks, the people who supposedly so benefit from it? 75% of Blacks agreed with that statement. In fact, 30% of progressives agreed with that statement. So that is really pretty powerful and surprising to me in this, polarized era, particularly of social media, where apparently, the small percentage of people for whom political correctness is the most important thing are getting so much of the attention and megaphone because, again, they create conflict and we love conflict. So let me just actually show where to go. Hang on. All right, hang on. Okay. This is maybe I'll make it full page. This is a diagram that was created by the political scientists who did this study. And the name of their study is The Hidden Tribes of America. And here are the 7 hidden tribes. And you can see that they go very much along the developmental line. With over here is to the right are the devoted conservatives and the traditional conservatives. So devoted being 6%, traditional being 19%. That's 25% traditionalists. It's about what integral theory would say. And then the moderates, we get into the modern stage of development. We have the moderates, the politically disengaged, and the passive liberals. That means they're liberal in the old-fashioned sense of, freedom and so forth, but not necessarily progressive. And here we have 56% in these 3 categories. And this would be roughly the modern stage of development. And, just a finer slicing and dicing of it. It's very, very interesting. I'll link to this, by the way, and you can see it for yourself. And then on the left, appropriately, are the progressive activists, that's 8%, and the traditional liberals, which is 11%, and that's 19%. And, we often talk about the green being maybe 20, 22%. This is certainly in that ballpark. So what they are showing, you can see the 4 big categories in the middle, they refer to as the exhausted majority. And these are the people who are really turned off by the political correctness and the idea that, it's like the author of the article said, the vast majority of Americans seem to see not so much genuine concern for social justice in political correct speech policing, not so much a general concern for social justice as in the preening display of cultural superiority. And that, I think, is really true. And I think that that is still the leverage point that Trump may have. It is culturally. And in a way, Trump is doing some good and in challenging the hegemony of the political correct speech police in policing our public discourse. And I prove that. I think that's ultimately a good thing. And we're seeing that. I think there's an example that's arisen here in the last couple of weeks. And that is when Trump said that you could refer to him as a nationalist and that nationalism is not a bad thing. And that was always my understanding. Words change meaning, and I think this is a word whose meaning is changing, but not so fast for most people. Nationalism is not a bad word. And, I've been a political science junkie since I was a major back in my undergraduate days, and it just meant somebody who was nation first. Now, can you tar that word with white nationalism? Yes, and that's what the media is, the fake news media, if you will, is trying to do. And I think actually Macron in France, the Prime Minister of France, did a speech last week or earlier or this weekend about the difference between patriotism and nationalism, that nationalism was closed to the outside, and while patriotism was open to the outside and just proud of who they were. And I think that's a very good distinction. And I think that may be how the meanings of these words continue to evolve. But for the vast majority of people, that word does not have, in America at least, that word does not have a negative connotation. And they're just not, it's not that important to them that this definition is going to change. So when you require that it changes, then you turn them off. And that, I think, is the Achilles heel of what is, every political movement has somebody that they have to sort of disavow in a certain way. And I think this is what the Democrats are going to have to do, which is why I'm still sort of for Al Franken, at least as a thought experiment, as the Democratic candidate, because he's the one who could credibly say, hey, I fell on the sword of political correctness and I'm back. And none of the stuff that he did, I think, would disqualify him for the vast majority of people. And besides, what could be more interesting than a Franken versus Trump race? Anyway. All right. Well, I think I'll leave it at that today, folks. Again, you can reach me at jeff@dailyevolver.com or go to dailyevolver.com and you'll see in the Connect tab, there's a button you can press and leave me a voicemail. You could do that too. Love hearing from you. And we will check in again next week for another edition of the Daily Evolver. Thanks, folks.